gotta come back and get it. And that fish bit on the cast right before that. I didn't get him and didn't hook him, but we got him that time. He's not a giant, but he's a swim jig fish. We got it started. Awesome. 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 This right here could be one of the most versatile lures out there. You know, it represents so many things. You know, when I think of a swim jig, I think I'm really representing a bluegill. So many of the times, you know, a lot of people think it represents a crawdad. You know, I use it a lot during a shad spawn. But with it being so weedless and then representing so many different things that a bass forages on, it's just a bait that you've got to have tied on almost year round. Man, I kind of think that I've been overworking this swim jig this morning. You know, I've been shaking it. I like shaking the swim jig a lot. But, you know, the last couple bites I've had, I just on a steady retrieve, you know, and it may be because the water's pretty cold. You know, we've got fairly cold water. Fish feels cold. But, one of the things that you've got to figure out with this bait, you know, we talk about how versatile it is. You can swim it deeper in the water column. You can swim it right up on the surface, almost waking it like you would a wake bait. You've got to figure that out. You got to figure out the retrieve. You got to figure out the trailer. Those are some of the things that I want to talk about today in this video as we talk about this versatile bait. So just with all the baits you fish, you know, this bait's no different. You know, you've really got to pay attention to when that bite comes. What retrieve are you using when that bite comes? You know, sometimes, you know, you might reel it in really quick to make that next cast, and that's when a bass eats it, you know, and your bait's up high in the water column towards the surface, you're reeling it quicker. Or maybe, you know, it's when you just picked out a backlash and you start reeling it, you know, that tells me that fish is down in the water column. He's down on the bottom. I need to slow my bait down. So it's just so critical. Like with all your baits, and especially this one, pay attention to how those bites are coming and try to duplicate it. You know, I'm always going to start out shaking that thing. You know, for me, I like getting that rod tip up, really pumping it, making that skirt flare, making that trailer really react. You know, that's just how I start. That's going to be the way that I can cover a lot of water, you know, get an aggressive fish, you know, actively feeding fish. But there's so many times that's not going to be the case, and this bait will still shine. You know, today's an obvious example. You know, we've really let it get down in the water column. We've slowed up the retrieve. We're not imparting a lot of action, and it's just due to the day that we're dealt with. But, you know, there's no wrong way to do it. It's just one of those things you have to figure out. I've had events where I want to keep it within a few inches of the surface, you know, and maybe I'll go up to a 1/2 ounce, or I'll go to a lighter one. You know, you got to also experiment about what size swim jig that we're going to throw. For me, I like a swim jig that's got a little bit heavier hook. I'm going to throw my swim jig on braid, so, you know, I don't want like a big monster, super, you know, heavy hook, but a medium to heavier style hook or wire. You know, because I'm going to use it on braid. I'm going to be fishing it around heavy cover. I want a fairly stiff weed guard. I can always take some of the weed guard out if I need to, but I think it's really important to have some sort of swimming vertical line tie like this jig right here. It's just going to come through grass, through lily pads, through cover very, very well, and it swims upright. I think that's a big key when you're choosing your swim jig, is to have the proper head for the cover that you're fishing. The beauty of a vertical line tie is it splits everything. It like parts the Red Sea. Like when you're pulling it through grass, it comes through everything a lot better. You know, if you had a horizontal line tie or one that's up here, it's always going to catch on stuff, and you can't clean the bait off, you can't pop it. You're always going to have a little bit of junk around that line tie. So I think the vertical line tie to me is a very critical component when choosing my swim jig. What a big one. And I've been experimenting with my retrieves. That retrieve right there, I actually started kind of like what I call it the old springtime retrieve. It's where I throw it out there, I let it go to the bottom, and then there's another one. And I start swimming it back. That's a good one right there. That's a prime example of why you try that retrieve. You know, I am all the time trying different retrieves. There's a good one. Golly, come here, baby girl. Come here. I'm gonna break my rod. All right. Yes, sirree. Look at that one. It's a chunky monkey. I just love catching bass. Love catching bass. I was trying to say, I'm experimenting with my retrieves. You know, I love the pump and retrieve, you know, the retrieve where, let me stop me here, see if there's some more fish. The retrieve where you throw it out and you really pump it. Really an erratic, aggressive retrieve. That's my favorite. I start out doing that. You know, another retrieve is some people just throw it out there and then just swim it, just reel it like you would a spinnerbait or a crankbait. Well, then the retrieve I just experimented with again, you know, it's for me, it's a springtime retrieve a lot of times, where I throw it out there, I let it go to the bottom, and then I pump it, you know, 3-4 times, like something trying to flee away, then let it sink back to the bottom. Then pump it 3-4 times, and man, we had 2 bites really quick back to back doing that. So, you know, maybe that's kind of, I'm having to trigger them to get them to bite. You know, I think what happens at times when this particular retrieve, you know, this springtime retrieve I call it, is like, you know, fish get to following a bait, and then you kill it and it stops, and it's just like, man, they have to almost eat it because that bait's falling right back in their face. I think that's why at times this retrieve works really well when fish aren't fully committing to a standard retrieve, a consistent speed coming in. You know, this retrieve here, I get their attention by popping it, but then when I kill it, you know, it's falling right back in their face, and just out of reaction, they bite it. So if we were to talk about, you know, the other 2 retrieves that's a little bit different, you know, the straight retrieve or the really erratic, you know, pumping retrieve, yes, obviously you got to let the fish tell you. But, you know, if I had to choose a time, like the retrieve that I really like, the aggressive pumping retrieve, you know, there is a time that I think that really works is post spawn. When those fish are garden fry, those fry are up towards the top of the water, I'm keeping that jig right up underneath the surface of the water like a bluegill coming through, eating that fry. That would be a time that retrieve shines. The retrieve that we're using today, the one I'm kind of calling the springtime retrieve, is when they're spawning. Like, man, they're on the bed, they don't have fry yet, you know, that spawn time. And then, you know, maybe just the slow retrieve, you know, the steady retrieve coming in, that would almost be a pre-spawn retrieve, you know, or a colder retrieve, or a little bit when the fish are deeper. By no means is that the only time. I don't want to say that's the only time, but those are some of the times that they shine, or they're a little bit better than the other times. Man, every time I let it go to the bottom, I pump it 3 or 4 times and then kill it, and that's when they bite it. I just got done saying this point looks really good in the mouth of this pocket. Come here, buddy. Come here, come here. Awesome, awesome. One other important thing that I think is super critical, if I can get this fish unhooked. Let me get him unhooked and we'll talk. All right. One other thing that I think is super critical when you're talking about, you know, swim jigs is your setup. I'm a must on the 8:3-to-1 gear ratio reel, a quick gear ratio reel. That's a prime example. You know, you pump that rod, your rod's up high, you kill it, you've got to reel in that slack really, really quick to get that hook set in that fish. You know, another thing is a rod. I use a little bit more limber of a rod, a 7/4 medium heavy, but I make that up by using 50-pound braid. Those components I think are super critical. No matter how the retrieve is you're using, that fast gear ratio reel is a must. Don't skimp on that one. Right when that thing was falling, and I think it may be a good one. Oh yeah, they're all good, aren't they? Yes. You just make my day. Make my day. Catching them on a jig. Fat, chubby ones. I like fat, chubby ones. All right. Guys, the swim jig, man, figure out the retrieve. It is a very, very versatile bait. We figured out the retrieve today. They started biting it big time. If you like this content, another place you can check out some, go to Edwin Evers Fishing. I got a YouTube channel. I do this stuff all the time, but what a day. The swim jig, you guys got to have it tied on. I'd say almost 365 days a year. It is a versatile bait. Thanks, buddy.